Finally, the dust has settled on another brutal US track and field champs. There were some absolutely nuts performances, world leads, records set, and sweet upsets. But at the end of the day, it's all about who qualified for the world champs in Budapest next month, and also about those who didn't qualify. So today, let's discuss the winners and losers from this year's US track and field champs. First, we got to start with the two obvious big winners, Richardson and McLaughlin. I've already covered their performances in another video, so I'll keep it brief. But shit man, they both crushed their respective events, broke US championship records, ran world leads, and qualified for 2 events at the world champs. Richardson did start to look more human at the end of her 200s though. Very expected after a tough 4 days of consecutive racing and running unreal times. But honestly, not much more to be said, just beyond excited to see them against the world. Richardson's comeback to form has been especially sweet with how controversial her last couple years have been, and it's going to be juicy to see how McLaughlin will fare in the Open 400. My next big winner picks are another 2 athletes who qualified for 2 events, Javon Harrison and Noah Lyles. Harrison doing what he does best, qualifying in the long and high jump, 2 years after he did the same thing in Tokyo. The long and high seems like a very intuitive combo, but at the elite level you really just don't see it happening. And Harrison makes it seem absolutely routine. It's even more impressive when you take into account he's heavily focused on the high jump the last 2 years. He's won 3 Diamond League meetings and holds a current equal world lead at 2.33 meters. So yeah, while he has a long jump PB of 8.47 meters, he's only officially competed in the long jump 8 times in the last 2 years. Yet my man still comes out swinging, jumps 8.08 meters, clinches up a 3rd place by 1 centimeter, and then the next day jumps 226 in the high jump, securing 1st and that sweet Team USA spot. He's for sure one to keep an eye on. He made both finals in the jumps at Tokyo, so it'll be entertaining to see if he can maybe yoink a medal this time round. And then there's Lyles, the last of the biggest winners. He took the last individual slot on the men's 100 meter roster with a time of 10 flat. It wasn't a hot performance in terms of time, but it's the US 100 meter field. It's always stacked. As an example, only 1 athlete in the final hasn't run sub 10, and there was an abundance of other sprinters who didn't make the finals who have run sub 10. It's an extremely unforgiving event. As a bonus, Lyles was also the only male sprinter on the team to double in the sprint events this year, since Curley and Coleman barely couldn't get it done. And he supposedly did this all while having COVID the week prior to the trials and being on his ass. Crazy man and a big W. So those were just the big 4 winners, but then we have our smaller bonus winners. Athing Mu has moved up this year, switching to the 1500. She destroyed her own PB by 13 seconds and somehow qualified for the team after being missing in action for most of the year. Then there's Gabby Thomas, laying down a 4th best of all time, snagging a new PB, meeting record, and smashing an unbelievably rich field of 200 meter runners. She always turns up for the major events. There was also Katie Moon in the pole vault. She's continuing her rise back to Olympic gold form, jumping a world lead to kinda dominate the women's pole vault field. Also, she has the top 4 heights in the world this year. Definitely one to watch. Then there's the Div 2 superstar Cordell Tinch. He took an unbelievably close 2nd place in the 110 hurdles, and ever so slightly missed out on the long jump in 5th place as well. Then lastly, we have an athlete who didn't actually qualify for the team, but she's only 17 years old, Mia Bray Pedersen. She's a huge winner from this event. She smashed her own PBs and made it both to the 100 meter and 200 meter finals in the US champs at 17. Another teenage phenom. How many is that these days? Then we have this year's losers. The biggest loser in my opinion, even though he has a spot on the team in the 400 meters, it's Michael Norman. Earlier this year he announced his switch to the shorter sprints, namely the 100 meter. It was an exciting prospect considering his PB of 9.86 and how infrequently he actually runs the 100. But he came out and he kinda fell flat. This performance would undoubtedly be a confidence destroyer. He ran 10:31, didn't make it out of the heats, and then he pulled out of the 200. So yeah, he'll be at Worlds in the 400, and I really do hope him all the best. But this champ's performance will be mentally tough to process. Next is KC Lightfoot. He still competed well, jumped 581 in the men's pole vault and took 4th equal, barely missing out on a spot. But this was kind of a huge disappointment, and it's because earlier in the year he exploded and there was all this hype building around him. He jumped 6:07 a couple months prior to the meet, which is the 3rd highest jump in history and a new American record. We could have potentially been seeing Duplantis being challenged at a World Champs. But you know how it is, track and field is cutthroat. Another big name is Abby Steiner. Track is ruthless with its expectations of athletes, and after a blistering year and lots of eyes on her for 2023, she's just been a bit average. She narrowly missed out, ran a solid time of 22.07, but the field was just too strong. I mean, honestly, what can you do against an on-fire Sha'carri Richardson and a new 4th best time in all of history by Gabby Thomas? And lastly is Cooper Tier. My distance running knowledge is poor. I'm a jump and sprint enthusiast, but he's been an interesting personality to follow. He had a fantastic showing last year, mainly at the US Champs winning the 1500, and this year he got blasted out in the heats, and then he narrowly didn't cut it in the 5K. And that's kind of it for my list. Obviously, big congratulations to all of those who qualified. I really wish I could focus on more athletes. So, to the 550 of you out there, tell me who you'd have on the top of your winners and losers list.